We're going to keep trucking. Let's have a look at the story from tonight. There's actually quite a bit to share here because we have an interview with Luxon on RNZ as well. But let's go to the news story from News Hub tonight.
Criminal gangs are here to stay, according to a report by the Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor.
That's unless politicians can put aside their tough-on-crime rhetoric and agree to change their approach. But as political reporter Lloyd Burr explains, there wasn't much of that today.
Dennis O'Reilly's been in and around gangs most of his life.
Expert, right? This is an expert. Might not look like an expert because he's not wearing a tie, but in this instance, expert.
He's a life member of Black Power.
I'm no saint by any means, and I took part in a fair bit of that gang life.
He's a community advocate now, even has a master's in social practice, but keeps an eye on what's happening in the gang world.
They are just a fact of life, and it's the least bad outcome that is going to be the best we can do.
He was one of the contributors to this report, ordered by former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern into gang harm. It concludes there are no quick fixes to gang harm. We can't arrest our way out of the gang problem. Political rhetoric like tough on crime and soft on crime isn't helpful, and a zero tolerance approach by police won't work.
There are no short-term solutions, but that there is real hope in changing the type of landscape we have at the moment.
People talk about being tough on crime. I actually think the current Commissioner is being smart on crime, and what I hear the former dog handler proposing is, in my view, dumb on crime.
That former dog handler is Mark Mitchell, seen here in 1996. He's now National's police spokesperson. His party wants to ban gangs meeting in public and wearing patches too.
Gangs are not nice people. They want all the rights of being Kiwis, but they're not prepared to take the responsibilities of being Kiwis. They peddle in misery and cause suffering to many families up and down this country of ours.
The report recommends a stronger focus on prevention and early intervention, expanded violence reduction and addiction services, more prison rehabilitation programs, and a health approach instead of a solely law and order approach.
We're not going to be able to incarcerate our way out of this. That to truly have those long-term effects.
That's a great slogan. We're not going to be able to incarcerate our way out of this.
We're going to have to look far more holistically.
This holistic approach is more or less supported by Police Minister Ginny Anderson, who wasn't available for comment today. As for the opposition,
we're going to work on those long-term challenges and that social deprivation that often is a driver and leads into a life of crime. We're going to continue to do that work. Long-term, consistent, hard work.
The true fix is better education, better housing market, better job market, so people have better prospects than being a mob prospect.
And regarding the report's plea to dial back on the rhetoric.
Tough on crime and tough on gangs, and tough on the causes of crime, tough on gangs and tough on crime.
Expect more of that rhetoric over the coming months with an election to win.
Right, story number one. Now, I actually have a whole bunch to show, including probably best part of 6-minute conversation with Christopher Luxon on RNZ. But your initial thoughts, Chewy. Let's have at it, sir.
I hate when David Seymour says something that actually makes sense. He's right. It worries me how he'll get there, but he is right. This is, from National, just populist bullshit. They know it gets them votes. They don't know how to do it. They know it. They must know it doesn't work because they've tried it. They've tried it so many times. The one time the National Party did anything positive with gangs, it was Rob fucking Muldoon, who gave them all jobs. Like, you can't punish these guys out of a lifestyle because they don't care. They don't care about what society thinks about them. That's the whole reason that they're in a fucking gang, because people treat them shit already.
Yeah.
So wearing a patch, having a swastika on your face, and being an absolute bastard doesn't matter. We don't care about them. Put them aside. The adults in the gang, they're not the target. Their kids are. We have to break the cycle. We need to fund the people that work in their communities, that can talk to their partners, that can make sure their kids have better options. That's how you stop gangs. We had a really good opportunity to defund gangs, We did a referendum about it and we fucked
Yeah.
it up.
Yeah, totally.
And National could have taken a big hit out of the gang's incomes if they just pulled their heads out of their asses.
Well,
and they
hang on.
did it.
Not just take a big hit out of the gang's incomes, also, I think it was $500 million a year of tax take as well. So not just take a big hit out, but also add a big chunk into our coffers for all these things we're worried about when it comes to, education and the health system.
It makes me laugh that National talk about the hard work and the long term. They don't think in those terms. They're a populist party. They talk in terms of sugar hit policies, sugar hit programs, stuff that sounds good that'll get them votes that they'll never follow through on because they don't work and they know it and they don't care.
Yep. And we're going to now have a look, because the thing about the report that's come out, making it really clear, is it actually says using terminology like being tough on crime could actually do the opposite of what National is trying to do. So the senior science advisors and the scientific community are saying this doesn't work, this is going to be harmful, which is why at the start of the show, what I said was, when you get told by the experts that this is the worst way to do this, and you continue to do it, then what you're doing is you're speaking to your base. You're not trying to solve the issue. Now, let's just think about that for a second. If National let's just say that the gangs are out of control in New Zealand and everyone's running for their lives. That would be brilliant to get National elected. If the gang problem was solved, if the gang issues weren't there, that would be bad for National. So they are actually potentially going to get from being able to stir up the conversation around how dangerous the gangs are. Now, for many people out there who support National, when they would see a connection between various medications we've had over the last 3 years and how pharmaceuticals were pushing them, you'd say, well, hang on, there's a connection between those two things, so your point's not valid. Well, there's a connection between the National Party and seeing the gangs out of control, which actually helps National. So why is it any different? Because if they can paint the picture, be it accurate or not, that the gangs are out of control, that helps them get elected. If there is a picture on how to solve the problem, that doesn't play as well to their base.
It actually links back to what we were talking about earlier, a week ago now. You can't trust hunters to control pests. And it's exactly the same thing. It is in the hunter's best interest to make going hunting easier. And that's the same. If National wanted to solve the gang problem, then what would they talk about? It's their easiest target.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look, shall we? Because there was a conversation this morning on RNZ with Christopher Luxon, where he was challenged quite a lot about how what he was saying. I'll use our terminology rather than RNZ's terminology. And I think the technical term was horse shit. And he didn't have a lot to say in other than basically saying, I don't accept those scientific findings, I know best. And he cited some other international situations, which I've got the information for on one of them, and we'll show you what it's all about.
Oh, yes.
We'll show you what it's all about. RNZ this morning, talking to Christopher Luxon.
We're joined now by National Party leader Christopher Luxon. Kia ora, good morning.
Good morning.
This report, a science-based, evidence-based report looking at the evidence out there, would suggest a number of the policies you are proposing, such as banning gang patches, etc., do not work and, in fact, may make things worse.
Well, I think what's obvious is what the government's been doing over the last 6 years is not working. We've had a 66% increase in gang members. We've got a 33% increase in violent crime. We've got 75% growth in...
Now, to his credit, I think it's Corandan who's hosting this, does hold his feet to the fire a little bit. But we just always got to remember this. Mr. Luxon, science says your policy won't work. The response is, well, Labour. Well, Labour.
We've spoken about this in the past when he says that there's been a massive increase in gang members and that sort of thing. It's a relatively new thing of trying to work out how many gang members there are.
Yep.
So again, he's not providing context to his numbers.
Yep. It's that idea of the number of left-handed people went through the roof once they stopped beating children for being left-handed. It's like, the number of gang members gone up, or have they started identifying them in a different way to make it look like there's been an increase? It could be either, but Luxon wants to make sure he knows that we sell it, that there's been a big increase. We'll keep going.
Gang members from kids aged 18 to 25. Gangs are not nice people. They peddle in misery. They cause huge pain and suffering up and down this country. So
some of those figures are disputed. But putting that aside, coming back to the question of
he could have ducked out on that one, and he didn't.
Well, the chief science advisor argues it's difficult to measure gangs properly. But I want to put that aside because I want to come back to the key question, which is, they have looked at the evidence both here and overseas, the evidence. So they've just gone out and had a look, and the evidence shows gang laws targeting gangs are ineffective and, in fact, may make it worse. And that is what you're proposing.
I think if you talk about what the Labor government has done in Western Australia, if you look at what's happening in Queensland, these rules, a legislative approach and a focus on gangs and tackling gangs has actually worked incredibly well.
So are you suggesting that the evidence you have is more rigorous and comprehensive than that of the Chief Science Advisor?
Well, I'm being really clear. Clearly, what this government's been doing for the last 6 years has not worked at all. New Zealand is less safe under this government than it was when they started.
Again, that may well be true, and people will dispute that, and that may well be true, and that's fair enough to make that argument. But what I'm arguing about is the policies you've identified, aggravating factors for gangs, gang patches, banning gangs in public spaces, and the Chief Science Advisor saying the evidence says, well, actually, those policies will probably make it worse. They'll create a situation where more people will join gangs.
Yeah, disagree completely. We are in a place of crisis. You don't have a 33% increase in violent crime, a 66% increase in gangs. And the reality is gangs are not good. They peddle in misery.
The one thing that I'm getting frustrated with is, why has there been, in your opinion, a 33% increase in violent crime? Like, I've never heard Christopher Luxon answer that. Like, why has there been? What's the sociological, what's the financial, what's the economic, what's the societal issues that have caused that to happen? Because just saying it, be it true or not, and we've talked about the reporting of crime and how it's skewing things a bit, but be it true or not, actually understanding why it's happened is the way to solving it, not just vomiting out the number over and over and over again. And I don't know, I'm in the process of approaching all the leaders. Will Christopher Luxon come on with us? I would think probably not. We're probably not big enough, and we're probably, if they've ever watched anything we've done, won't want to put them in the situation. But I would like to ask him these questions. Why is that? If you're watching, Chris, why? Why has it gone up by 33%? What's the answer? Because even if it is a valid answer that you can lay at the feet of Labor, why has it gone up? How do we solve that problem? Not just, it's gone up, we're going to chuck them in prison. It's gone up, we're going to ban gang patches. You know what I mean? That I need more from a would-be government. But let's be honest, we need more from an effective opposition as well. A well-functioning democracy needs a really good opposition. We currently don't have one. That's why they're not smashing Labor in the polls.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my frustration. I'll never vote for National, but I can appreciate when they call out something that Labor is doing wrong or could do better. That's how we get a better country. That when they talk about holding people to account, that's what they should be doing. Instead, we get dog whistling. Instead, we get barking at cars. Instead, we get, I found this stat that sounds really good, but I'm going to just vomit it out with absolutely no context. And I'm going to absolutely run out this line that has been focus tested in the last week, that gangs are not nice people. They peddle misery up and down the country. We've played 2 clips. I've heard that 3 times now.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. I think that's who he's calling on, as John T is saying in the
text.
Take the wheel. Let's get going.
And suffering. They want all the rights of being a New Zealander. They're not prepared to take the responsibilities. And so I make no apologies for being tough on gangs. We're going to ban those gang patches. We're going to give the police dispersal powers, criminal activity breakup powers, warrantless search powers. And we will make it an aggravating factor.
It doesn't work.
I'm not sure there are that many people out there saying gangs are good. But what I guess that parallel to... Parallel to your proposals, what are the initiatives which this report says are necessary, the early interventions, the dealing with the intergenerational elements of this, people born into gang life? Give me some examples of some policies that National will implement, as well as your tough on crime stuff, that will actually address the root causes.
What we've said is also when you're actually in prison, and remembering this government's only target in this crime space has been a reduction in the prison population, is actually to make sure that all prisoners, whether they're remand or sentence prisoners, have access to every rehabilitation program that we've got. That's what we've got to do. We've got to be able to rehabilitate gang members, criminals when they're in prison. Equally, we're going to work really hard on the causes of crime, and a lot of that's around our social investment strategy that we've talked about before. But it's not an excuse for saying you don't
talk
also
about
be
it 'cause
tough
it's not
on crime
sexy.
and tough on gangs. You need to do both. You need to have stick and carrot. It can't just all be carrot. Clearly, the government's had evidence. If they believe so strongly in their approach, why have we got such poor outcomes in crime? So, I make no excuses. We are going to tackle gangs. You cannot have a town like Opotiki shut down because gangs came to town. You cannot have fights happening in Palmerston North and mums and kids cowering in coffee shops.
Just finally on this, do you not accept that this is an evidence-based study? This is an attempt to take the heat out of a politicised issue. We know this is a politicised issue.
It's not a politicised issue. We're being really clear about the causes of crime. We have a problem in New Zealand around crime.
Actually, I would challenge that. We're being really clear about the causes of crime. I actually don't. Unless I've missed it, I haven't heard anything. I heard no causation. All I've heard is committing crimes going up. I actually haven't heard anything about the causes of crime. Like, I'll be honest, I might have missed it, but I haven't heard anything about the causes of crime. Right? Because that's actually what we want to do. We want to figure out what are the causes, because then we can address it. If I've got a leak in my house, I want to find out where the leak is before I can fix it. I just keep talking about the leak. It's like, where is the leak? Why is it leaking? How do I fix it? And now I can fix it. That's what we want to do.
You just ban rain. That's how you fix it.
No, you put rain in prison. That would be a bucket. You just put all the rain into a bucket, and then everything will be okay.
I mean, he talks about it can't all be carrot. He never talks about carrot.
Yeah, that's true.
It's always stick.
Yeah.
Like, there's all of this talk about prison. And treating people on remand. Or they haven't even been convicted. Like they're all drug abusers. It's just retarded. But then we get a little snippet that we're going to talk about societal investment. I'm not going to tell you anything about that. We're going to talk about how Labor loves the gangs. The gangs. They think they're good guys.
We're going to get into that. Let's still got about 2 minutes to go, because there's a whole bunch of accusations put out shortly about how Labor gives money to the mongrel mob to do drug rehab, yada yada yada. I've got the information on that. We'll get to it shortly, but let's finish this diarrhea train that we've got going on at the moment.
One of the contributing factors is gangs, and so we're being really straight up about it and saying we're going to tackle the problems that we've got in this country, and we're going to have pragmatic, practical solutions.
It's a politicised issue, Mr. Luxon, because you accuse the Labor government of being soft on crime when in fact
they are soft on crime.
They are arresting hundreds of gang members. They're doing all sorts of it.
Crime is going up, Corin, and the outcome that most
But
New
to
Zealanders
suggest
are
that in
worried
any
about.
way...
Did you notice that goalpost shift? Corin Dan just said they're arresting hundreds of them, and he didn't address that. He went, and crime's going up. It's like, hang on. But because I did this as a tweet, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. You can go to my Twitter feed if you want to see it, people. That we had a report a few weeks ago about the number of that Labor has introduced some kind of new legislation around fighting organised crime, criminal elements, gangs, and there'd been hundreds, if not thousands, I think, of arrests. And I put out a tweet and it said, how many would National need to see before they actually said, okay, now you're no longer soft on crime? Like, what number would National need to see? Remember, we did this with Michael Woodhouse, I'm going to say, when we talked about inflation. And he was like, well, we'd probably be around 5.5%. And that's where we're at 7.2. So actually, when they were complaining about inflation, by their own acknowledgement, they were complaining about 1.7% of inflation, which actually 5.5 was impossible. Nowhere in the world was that. But, they had to say something, because if they had said 7.2 is not that bad, then that wouldn't have been good for the base. National or Labor policy at the moment is causing hundreds and hundreds of gang members to get arrested. So what number does National need to see before they finally go, yep, that's enough? All of them? Double the number getting arrested? What is that number? Let's finish out, eh?
The police are somehow operating in a different way than they were over the last 10 years is politicising it.
This government's operating in a very different way. It sent a message from the very top that they're soft on crime. It's not surprising. They've given $2.7 million to the mongrel mob for drug rehabilitation services. That's insane. That's insane. They're the people that create the drug.
It's also not true.
In the first place. There's much better rehabilitation providers than the mongrel mob. They give $9,000 to gang members to complete census forms. You've now got Labor MPs meeting with Harry Tam. Harry Tam's endorsing the coalition of chaos. He's the new coalition partner for the Labor government. So, I mean, the point is really.
Well, we should note that was there was an accidental meeting. We'll put that one to the side. Yeah, I'm just curious as to, because you've dismissed this report from a chief science advisor who's looked at all the evidence. You're quite happy to quote from the chief science advisor when it backs your genetic modification policy.
Yeah, and I've also looked at the evidence in Western Australia under Mark McGowan, a Labor Premier over there, who's done an exceptionally good job of cracking down on gangs. I've looked at the evidence in Queensland as well as we've developed our policies. And so, I make no apologies. Yes, we're going to work on the continued causes of crime. That's important, and the approach we'll use will be social.
We're going to continue to work on it, but we're not going to explain any part of that to you now. But we are going to continue to work on it.
Investment around that. But we also need to say, look, I'm sorry, but you just cannot run amok as a gang member causing mayhem and misery across the country.
A couple of quick questions about Oranga.
Right, we're going to leave it there. And before we do, I found that tweet. Let me bring it across. So we've got all that information. So this is the tweet I was talking about that I sent out. Operation Cobalt has affected 40,000 gang-related charges, over 100 a day. That's over 100 charges a day in 12 months. More than 8,000 individuals have been arrested. National says Labor soft on crime. I wonder how many charges they would need to see to recant that talking about. Would it be 50,000, 100,000? How many? Because it's over 100 a day. So how many would National... I mean, remember, Luxon is incredibly concerned, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be concerned about this, New Zealand, but about, 3 ram raids every 2 days. Well, they're currently making over 100 charges every single day against gang crime. Why do they not get the credit for that? It's like, what number do you need to see to not be soft, quote unquote, soft on crime? Shall we?
I would also like to point out the fact that although there are a lot of things that criminal gangs have in common, you can't look at a gang in Australia and what works at combating that and bring it over to New Zealand, because they are fundamentally different. Their cultures are different. The reasons, their history is different. The engagement is different. The communities are different. This is classic National of like, we can't possibly solve this problem in-house. We have to look at X country overseas.
Yeah.
And it's just, they take the policy and they bring it over here, and they miss all the context of why it was successful. They had local experts looking at their local problem and solving them locally. We're apparently too small and stupid to do that.
Yeah,
we don't listen to people like Harry Tam, who has the lived experience of being in a gang and knowing how to get through to these people.
Speaking of Harry Tam, I've started investigations to see if I can get him on. Apparently he's a very private person. He won't talk to media very much at all, but I'm going to try and get him on. And just in saying this is a side note, sorry. We talked last night about trying to get Shamabel Jacob on tonight. Just so you know, I approached him. He's on holiday with his kids at school holidays. So that didn't happen, but I'm still investigating getting another economist on maybe tomorrow night. Back to what we're talking about. It is so funny when a would-be government, when a politician would say, look what they're doing in Western Australia. When it comes to things like capital gains tax or wealth tax, they won't go, look at what they're doing in Western Australia, or whatever part of the word they're pulling that from. It's a bit like what Corin actually said about, you're happy to use the chief science advisor on your stuff and then ignore him on the stuff that doesn't suit your narrative. I don't feel like you can do that. It's an all or nothing. 2 things that have come out of this. The first is giving the mongrel mob $2.7 million to do drug rehab. Well, let's have a look at the facts and figures behind that. Is Labor funding the mongrel mob? What you need to know. This is a story from 2021. The money from the proceeds of crime was signed off by those at the top of Labor, including then Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. It was for a methamphetamine rehabilitation program called Kahukura in the Central Hawke's Bay, but the organisation running the program has gang connections. Some of the property it is held on has gang connections, and some of those taking part do too. However, the organisation has its aim in its name, hard to reach. It's trying to help Māori and marginalised communities and help them rebuild. And those applying for that $2.75 million had to jump through a lot of hoops before it was approved. Later in the story, it talks about the program. This is from the then Prime Minister talking to Morning Report. It's a marae-based program that, yes, the participants are gang-affiliated participants who have been involved in meth-related crime and activity, who have this meth addiction. The program is designed to try and reduce down criminal activity and meth addiction. Little side note. Do you let's just say they're all crims, all these people involved in this rehab situation. Do you think a crim on meth would be better for society, or a crim off meth? Like, I'm just wondering, even if we give them all the credit that they are all gang related, they all crims are all, they're doing it, which would be better for a functioning society? I mean, I know it's maybe a bit of a Sophie's choice, but I think a crim off meth would be better. That's not what is happening, but in general. So, are there gang members involved? This is the same story. Ardern said there are individuals who have had gang-related backgrounds are involved in running the program. That is true. But also it is designed to try and address drug use within gang membership as well. So it is not unexpected that those with a background would be involved in the program. Now, notice the difference. Luxon says they gave $2.7 million, I think, to the mongrel mob, is what he said. What the program is having people who are gang affiliated, who used to be in gangs, who are still working in and around, I guess, gangs, running the programs that they need to run to speak to people in the gangs. It's a marae-based program that is residential, and the question and the choice we have is we either accept that we want drug rehabilitation programs to involve those who have criminal backgrounds, or we exclude them. My view is, if they are involved in crime and victimization, I want to address meth addictions with those groups. They are perpetrating a problem. If we choose not to do that, then I don't see how we solve the problem. The organisation involved in running the program, Hard to Reach, is run by co-director Harry Tam, a former mongrel mob member. So there's part one, right? Luxon says they're giving $2.7 million to the mongrel mob. It would appear from that report that there are a bunch of people who are either gang affiliated or former gang members who are doing the mahi to get into the gangs to try help them, which will in turn help society with meth addiction. Who else are they going to do it? Are they going to get their local national MP in there doing that? Do you reckon he's going to be welcomed onto the marae to be the person to do it?
No, well, so you're missing an important point here, Pat. And I'm not surprised, because you're a rabid lefty woke commie cuck. Famously, once you're a gang member, you have no value. There is no redemption.
I forgot.
You can't possibly turn your life around. So don't bother. Just straight to jail. That's the only way. And if you're a former gang member that's maybe looked back and gone, shit, this hasn't been a great life for me, and I want people to, I want to be an example how it's not the only option. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Don't look into it. Please don't look into it.
Okay,
but it just doesn't work. Straight to jail.
Yeah. $193,000 straight to jail.
Yeah, straight to jail.
$193,000 to put someone in a marae-based live-in facility. Forget marae-based. Other ones, live-in facility. I wonder what would be more effective to get that person off the drugs and to being a valued member of society again.
Well, so often, like I mean, the whole marae-based thing, right? So many people use that. Oh, it's almost a weasel word. Oh, it's marae-based, so it's not effective. And we come back to another problem that we have here: the European supremacy, the Western supremacy. It must be a European-based, a white-based solution. It's got to be. We can't possibly factor in cultural affiliation.
Yeah,
we can't possibly talk to them in their own language. We can't possibly use, similar backgrounds, similar experiences to get a message through. because that's just giving money to Māori gangs.
Yeah.
And it's always there. Whenever they talk about this program, it's always there. Harry Tam is in the mongrel mob. That's it. And we're giving money to gang members. And they made reference to the local MP here, Ingrid Leary, meeting with mongrel mob people. And that's a negative. It's not. If you shut people out of society, either by locking them up or telling them that they have no value, there's no point in you voting because we don't give a shit about what matters to you, then you have people outside of society. If you're outside of society, why would they give a single fuck what you think?
Yeah.
It's so dumb.
Yeah. Well, I've done, and especially from groups that are talking about the outcomes that we want. The outcomes that we need to get. If they're using the policies and they're putting in practice things that aren't going to get those outcomes, then it's not just dumb. It's obvious pandering to a base that they want the votes from. Because if you're actually if your objective is to get the right outcome, then you should be doing the best way to get that outcome, the best policies, the best practices. And if you're being told these aren't the best ways that you power through anyway, then it's obviously it's not about the outcomes. It's about getting elected, and it's about pandering to your group. Let's have a look at Western Australia. Right, because he talked about Western Australia. This is the last thing we're doing for tonight before we head off. Thanks for being with us tonight, guys. This is the law. Australian rebels bikies convicted under flouting tattoos under strict new gang laws. This is what Luxon was talking about. 3 Perth-based outlaw motorcycle gang members have received landmark convictions under a new strict gang law after being caught showing their club tattoos while shirtless at a pool party. There's a bunch of information there, but I thought what I'd read for you is something that's sort of quite pertinent to what's going on. This is what they say. Apparently there was 7 charges, but 3 convictions, right? There were 3 convictions. Oh, this is the Western Australia Police Commissioner. That's probably Colonel Blanche, whatever. This is the first time it's been done. Other bikies have been hit with summons under the new laws, but they have opted to cop a fine instead. So remember, this is this big law that's going to change the world and make it all good again. And these bikies are kind of going, well, I'll just pay the $50. And I'll keep wearing my patch. So most of them have opted to pay a fine. I said Tuesday marked the legislation first courtroom test. Under the new Western Australian law targeting outlaw motorcycle gangs, an offender can be jailed for up to a year and fined $12,000 for consorting or displaying the insignia of an identified organisation in a public place. That sounds really weird. An identified organisation in a public place. Rotary better watch out. Gang tattoos and patches fall within the laws, and some members are already seen publicly growing hair or taping over tattoos. The new laws also saw the introduction of what the Western Australian government itself labelled the toughest anti-consorting regime in the country. Breaches carry a maximum penalty of 5 years in jail. Now, this is all still fairly new, but let me just show you why I think it probably won't stand up long term. There is a case going on right now, which is the first person who's being charged. What's happened is that's actually got all of the gangs to join together as one unit. So now you've got a super gang because of this law to fund this court case to then obviously hopefully overturn the law. So what you've actually done is you've turned your fractured gang culture into a united force to fight
so
this
now
thing.
there's fewer gangs.
Yeah,
there's fewer gangs now. There's just one big gang.
Mega gang. Listen to this though, right? Think about what this legislation is trying to do, right? At the time the legislation was announced, former Premier Mark McGowan said the laws would, this is what they thought they would do, would take away the ability for bikie gangs to communicate with each other. They thought that they'd be able to bring in a law. I don't want to give gangs ideas here. It says telephone. But they thought that this law would take away the ability for bikie gangs to communicate with one another. That, on top of a bunch of really overly simplistic things like that we hear people say, which is once all the gangs disappear into society and you can't identify them anymore, they actually might become more dangerous as well. So there's lots of reasons that this is ridiculous. I wouldn't be surprised if the Australian law got overturned. But Chewie, I love what you said before about importing solutions from other countries and how it may not fit with what we're doing here, especially when the experts here are saying, here's how you solve the problem. And you've got a party going, nope, We'll do it the way Western Australia does. Western Australia, renowned for their relationship with Indigenous people. So we'll just do it their way.
There's so many people out there. There's so many experts that know how to get through to these people. They're the NGOs. They're the anti-domestic violence. They're the school teachers that know the community. They all know how to do this. It's not sexy. Doesn't get votes. Not sexy. Doesn't get votes. Won't do it. Too much carrot. Not enough stick.
Yeah.
Like, I urge everyone to go back through our back catalogue and have a look at that interview with Chester Burrows. He was a minister involved in the area that had a lot of gangs, and they tried to bring in that anti-gang insignia thing, and guess what? Spoiler alert, didn't fucking work.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Stupid.
And he recanted it as well. Not just didn't work, but he recanted it. I mean, I don't
Very,
want to sound
very
depressing.
clearly.
Almost on his deathbed, he recanted it because he talked to us months before he passed away.
And guess what? You ban the patches. Can't have patches anymore. Guess what? Are you going to ban a colour? Are you going to ban red and blue? Because that's what they'll do. You can't. It's too broad. So they'll just lose the patches, go back to colours, and you've solved nothing.
Yeah.
And if you go any further, it's too broad. It's going to catch other people up. I would love the mongrel mob to go, all right, we're ditching the insignia. What we're going to do now is we're going to wear a shirt and tie.
I was just thinking exactly the same thing. I would love to see one of these gangs meet up in like I've got my
blazers and jodhpurs.
I've got my, what do you call these things? They've got like my Hallenstein's pants on, looking sort of semi-respectable, and my leather shoes on, and all meeting in town with their face tattoos and their thing, but all in t-shirts and shirts, and just going to every cafe and just having a meeting about their business and see how society, because that'll solve all the problems, Chewy. You know, if all the gangs just turn up in like khaki pants and t-shirts with flip-flops on, then there's going to be no problems, because that's going to stop the drug trade, and that's going to stop the violence. If they're wearing khaki pants and, you know, sports blazers, there'll be no issues from there on in, Chewy. Oh, fuck, I'd love to do that. Oh, I'd love to do that. We should totally connect with a local gang and say, guys, let's do this and film it, and then send it to Luxon and go, problem solved. I would love to do that.